We are so allegedly live.
Are we live? We're warm.
Allegedly. Yes.
Allegedly,
Yes. I'm viewing stream on YouTube and we're live.
we are live to the world. Well, awesome. Well, warm leatherettes and birdie num num. Yes, I see us live too. Life is good. Let me turn off this YouTube because I know how it's going to go. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone, or those who are right now here to Aeon Byte Live. Welcome to the desert of the real and that distant ship smoke on the horizon. This is episode 36. And as always, it is an honor to have with us at the Virtual Alexandria, Chris Knowles. Chris, thanks for being here, man.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invite.
Pleasure's all ours and always great to have you. And always great to have the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing tonight?
I'm fine. Just getting this chat room started, warming them up, getting them ready for a wild ride.
Yeah, you've got
We'll
your
get all
own act.
abducted, That's what it looks like.
Awesome. Excuse me. Well, awesome. It's great to have this show on this Saturday night. It's as always, there will be an audio version out on all our podcast channels, iTunes, iHeartRadio. Recently put the show on Amazon Podcast. I guess they have a new thing now. So you can get this podcast on Amazon. And the audio version should be out in a couple of days. For those of you in the chat room joining, I'm sure most of you know the drill. Hello, Jasmine. Hello, Beth Martins. Hello, Vance. Oh, Vance, you're there too. We have, if you have any questions for Chris, please put question marks or write them in caps. Of course, if you do a super chat, you will get put up. Vance will do his best to get to it. Please keep it on topic. Beth is, of course, asking about the siren, but that would be its own show for Chris to do. That could be another 4 hours. And that's like the topic tonight. It's an endless evolving thing that, well, it's just incredible. So, and so that's really it. And so, Chris, I guess to start out with, last time you were here, we were talking about the sad departure of Neil Peart. And that was, I think, January and February. I know there was snow on the ground on my end. So how has 2020 been for you since then?
Same that it's been for everybody, just watching the wheels come off the buggy, pretty much. I mean, here we are. We were warned for millennia that we would arrive at this point, and now we're at that point. So what can you say? Things have been very weird. Things got really weird at the beginning of July, like, highly weird, which I guess is the topic of discussion here. Things got very weird very quickly and haven't seemed to slow down at all. And
how do you I guess cope with it? I mean, I'm sure you just do what you always do, research and record, like the Watcher in Marvel, sit back and record everything that's happening.
Well, it's funny because it's kind of like slow pitch softball, because so many things are coming in that are no brainers for me, things that I've been following for decades now. And, literally in my wheelhouse, literally, all these things sort of popping up in my area, in my neighborhood, so to speak, not my literal neighborhood, but my general vicinity here. We can touch on the situation with Judge Salas and Deutsche Bank and Roy Den Hollander and all those people, which is, a whole different situation. But the thing that I've really noticed, and the thing that I'm kind of sensing, I'm just trying to piece together as best I can, is how a lot of this seems to be following on the Ghislaine Maxwell arrest in New Hampshire. I think we were on the show, or I was on your show talking about New Hampshire, talking about high weirdness in New Hampshire not so long ago. So that was kind of, talk about being in my wheelhouse. There's a lot of things that I sort of touched upon in the book. I remember you asked me this at the beginning of the year, and I hadn't really, I didn't have a satisfactory answer for you, but boy, a lot of things have been really lining up with things that I wrote about in the book. So yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting experience. It reminds me a lot. I mean, last time things were getting this hectic was in 2017, which was just, I mean, the craziest year of my life, particularly with the work and the symbolism and the synchronicity. It's just completely out of control. But I mean, this is the new normal. I was talking about the new normal 10, 12 years ago, and saying how, you can only push so much, you can only push so much at the door before it collapses. And I think that's the point we're at now. We've had so many people kicking at the wheels for so long that they, like I said, they're just coming off the buggy. And I think a lot of people are just talking about how like they feel like their entire experience of reality has changed, which I think is very true. And reality itself has changed. I mean, you don't really hear a lot from, Dawkins and Dennett and all those kind of people. Bill Nye is sort of flying the flag for wearing a mask and whatever, whatever. He likes to jump on whatever gravy train pulls into the station. But, everybody's saying it. It's like, what is going on? Why does everything feel so strange? Why are all these things happening? And it's just because, reality, there are one or two things happening. One is that reality is actually changing. The second is, which is that our models of reality are collapsing. So we no longer can provide context for the things that happen because nothing applies to these preconceptions that we all once held, And, for instance, one of the things that I've been really thinking a lot about is just not worrying about science or trying to explain things scientifically or quasi-scientifically, looking at everything that's happening, both in the macrocosm, the things that we're all familiar with going on, and the things that, in the microcosm, the things that I've been studying. I'm no longer trying to explain, like, I'm no longer trying to provide myself with some sort of, how do I even put this? I'm no longer trying to provide myself with some sort of basis, some rational basis for the things that are happening, because so much of what is happening is so incredibly irrational. There's no ontology for what's going on right now, let's just say, there really isn't.
Do you think there's a precedent? Could we say late 60s, fall of Alexandria? I mean, is there some time in history that you could say a point of relation for us, or?
I think this is a lot stranger than the 60s.
In the late 60s with all.
Yeah, because the late 60s, you still had a lot of bottlenecks. You still had a lot of gatekeepers on the dissemination of information. And that's no longer true. So you had all these things happening with the SDS and the Yippies, Weather Underground, the anti-war movements. I mean, all these things were happening, and the hate really started going sour in late '67, and you had a lot of situations eerily analogous to what's going on in San Francisco now, but it's even more spoiled. It's turned even more, it's fermented, I guess you would say. So I don't think this late 60s is an appropriate model, simply because you had like this running commentary from the establishment, from the establishment media, that we're putting everything into context for people. And you don't have that now, because back in the late 60s, you had things going on. You certainly had all sorts of media. I mean, there's always been a lot of media. The fact that social media and the internet has somehow filled this void in our lives is absolutely false. We've always had a lot of media, but the difference now is how it's distributed, and how you get this instantaneous, media situations, events go around the world instantaneously now. There's no longer this filtering mechanism where things have to sort of well up and be processed. You had sort of the lag time, even with newspapers, that newspapers had to be printed, right? They had to be printed and they had to be sent out to people's homes. So you didn't have that kind of instantaneous, and you didn't have like the kind of dogpiling that you have now. Social media has really created like these roving gangs. People just rove around the internet. It's very Gibsonian, right? They rove around the internet just looking for people to attack. I mean, you certainly didn't have anything like that. So I don't think this is like the late 60s. And I'm not exactly sure it's like the fall of Alexandria, though I think that, you know, that sort of chaos that you had, that, you know, eventually the church filled that void, right? Because you had all sorts of street violence between all these different sects and ethnic groups and so on and so forth. But, you know, the church, with the blessing of the the emperor, was very quick to fill these voids and to provide some sort of overall context. You know, the church is now, it's funny because what's going on with the Christian church today, it's under attack in the same way that paganism, I hate that term, by the way. I hate the term paganism. It's so inaccurate. It doesn't describe anything. You know, but let's say pre-Christian religion, because you can count in, you know, the philosophers, you know, things that happened like with Hypatia in Alexandria, you know, all these things that were going on, that you just had this welter, all, you know, all these different groups vying for control and vying for adherence. You know, I think that's more similar, but again, I think this is just unprecedented. And I think it's unprecedented because of the way that information travels today. You know, it's instantaneous. We've built this sort of exterior brain that acts exactly like, you know, like a brain does, and things, you know, there's no precedent for that. But I do also think that that's in large part responsible for the breakdown of consensus reality. You know, I mean, consensus reality is breaking down. I mean, there's no reasonable argument against that. You don't see like these guys in fedoras walking around trying to, you know, man the hustings of consensus reality anymore. They don't even bother because they know that the battle is lost, you know. I just read that Dawkins was sort of, you know, he's going on now about like the whole woke thing and everything. And it's like, boy, you know, there's a come down for somebody, you know, as somebody who is going to remake the world in his own image, you know, the world's philosophical underpinnings in his own image. And now he's just like whining about the woke people like everyone else is.
Oh my God.
You know, it's just a really strange time. It's a very strange time. And there is no consensus. There is no like, this is the right way to do things anymore. You know, because it used to be like, again, in the 60s, they're like, this is the right way to run a society, and people dissent from that, and people will want to revise that or, you know, reform that. But there was that understanding. There's no longer that understanding at any level. Nobody agrees on anything anymore. So I don't see how you can run a free and open society when there's no consensus to literally anything, you know. Because if you disagree, you can go off in your own corner of the internet and find people to go along with your view of things. And it's just, there's no mainstream anymore. You know, I just laugh at all these people who still talk about like, you know, shock the bourgeoisie. It's like, that doesn't exist. There is no mainstream. There is no gatekeeper. There is increasingly no basis for culture and society as we understood them. And I think that's an incredibly dangerous time. And I think that we're seeing how that plays out. We're seeing how that works in reality. And I think it's only going to get more chaotic and more violent.
Mm. But do you think, per the title of the show, Wickedness in Highly Strange Places, are you saying you think the managerial classes have lost it? The angels at the top are still in control? Or I remember you always talked there was a war in heaven. Is this still going on and everybody has lost control? Or do you think it's being engineered?
I think the war in heaven is very real,
Mhm.
and I think that the Ghislaine Maxwell thing was kind of like a Waterloo event. I'm not exactly sure for who yet, but it just seemed like it was a decisive turn in the battle, because there's been all these things that have been going on, you know, like the aftershocks. I mean, that was the tremor, and now we have the aftershocks, and things have gotten really strange because of that. But the interesting thing, you know, when you talk about highly strange, I mean, she was arrested on World UFO Day, and I just can't get over that. That's just so bizarre, because last year nobody would have cared, right? Like, World UFO Day, what the hell is that? Who cares, right? But you know, I mean, it was trending top 10 in Twitter this year, and now you have this really concerted effort on the part of people in the military and people in the military industrial complex to push this whole UFO reality disclosure. I don't even know what to call it anymore, but it's interesting to me that this starts with Ghislaine Maxwell being arrested on World UFO Day, and now it seems to be ending with this, whatever this quasi pseudo disclosure event is. And you know, I mean, what gets more highly strange than that, right?
I think the reaction of everybody, some people saying Twitter, people are still more worried about masks and statues than they are about this big UFO reveal. So we can't even, most of the people can't even accept this stuff from the government or this big reveal. It's
No, I agree with you. I
very
mean,
strange.
you know, the one thing I said to our friend Gordon White today is like, what if they gave a disclosure and no one cared, you know? But
The gods have arrived and we don't give a shit.
I think we may be looking at a situation where not caring is not an option. That, you know, you'll be compelled to care. You'll be made to care, because I don't think the people who are involved in this play around. I don't think that these are people who are unknown. Well, I mean, you can just sort of X out DeLong because he's just a figurehead to sell it to the millennials, or I guess the millennials now. I don't think Gen Zers care about Tom DeLonge anymore. But you know, he was just sort of a vehicle for this. But the people who are involved in this, I mean, there's your secret government right there. You know, I mean, you look at the names of people who are involved with TTSA, to the stars, which ironically was the same name. We can get into the whole Jack Parsons thing, but that was the same name that Jack Parsons used when he either quit or was fired from Jet Propulsion Laboratories. He had a company called Ad Astra, you know, to the stars. And it's the same, you know, it's just Latin for the same thing. And the thing that I find so funny is that they're talking about the metals now, you know, the anomalous metals or recovered spacecraft metals. I mean, you know, it's intentionally vague and confusing. But when Jack Parsons started Ad Astra, there was this whole thing with, like, you know, they were developing mystery metals. So I just find that, like, boy, there's an interesting kind of connection there. I wonder if there's any meaning to that, you know? I mean, we do know that Tom DeLonge's a Freemason. I'm sure everybody he's working with is either a Mason or in some kind of secret order, you know? I really don't think the people at those levels are not, you know, in some capacity or another. I just don't think that that's the way it works. But yeah, I'll tell you. Oh, the other thing too, the day after Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested, the director of MUFON was arrested in Huntington Beach on on one of these kind of, you know, these kiddie honey trap deals where what was that guy, Chris Hansen, To Catch a Predator? You know, it's the same kind of deal where, you know, he was lured into talking to a detective who was a, you know, 13-year-old girl and wanted to get together at some park for sex and all this kind of stuff, which, you know, doesn't surprise me and shouldn't surprise anybody who's familiar with the whole subculture of ufology. But I find that the timing really interesting, because I don't think this was kind of like a one-off him. I don't think he just woke up and said, you know what, I'm going to go look for a 13-year-old girl. Man, that would really make my day. You know, I'm having a midlife crisis. Somebody else would go out and buy a Mustang, but I'm going to go like find a nice 13-year-old girl in a park in Huntington Beach. You know, it's just so strange. So I think it's probably a good bet that he was involved in this kind of thing all along, or at least for some time, and it was either tolerated or ignored. I think that's probably good. That's how these things usually pan out. But speaking of the UFO thing, so back in the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton had made, pretty widely publicized declaration that she was going to open the UFO files and all this kind of stuff.
All right.
And she did that in Conway, New Hampshire, which is nowhere. It's this little, it's a postage stamp. I think they might have like a post office and a gas station there, but because of the New England, the New Hampshire primaries, that this Conway Daily Sun paper became sort of, I guess maybe they're a kingmaker. So I'm not exactly sure. It's very strange. I don't know why she went there to make this declaration. It seemed like a very strange place to make it. But on the 13th of this month, just almost 2 weeks ago, somebody who was working for the government in Conway and was also involved with Black Lives Matter and Defund the Police and all these kind of causes was also arrested. But in this case, I believe it was kiddie porn that was on his phone and stuff. And when the cops showed up to try to throw his phone away. But it's interesting too, because that's really not very far from where Ghislaine Maxwell was living when she was arrested. And I still can't understand why she was there. We heard all these stories like she's under the Antarctic ice in a submarine. She's living, on top of the Himalayan mountains and studying with a Tibetan yogi or something. She's in Moscow and feeding information to Vladimir Putin. You heard this woman was like in every exotic location that you could possibly imagine. And it turns out she's in New Hampshire, like literally just like, nowhere in New Hampshire. But then I was kind of looking at the alignments of, the area where she was and how it lined up with Betty and Barney Hill, getting back to the UFO thing, and where Aleister Crowley was summering not too long before he did the Amalantra working.
But do you wanna get the slides on so we can take the audience on a journey?
Why not? Let's do it.
Let's do it. Before we do that, Vince, any big questions from the audience?
Haven't seen any. A lot of discussion. Everybody's excited, and sometimes they're coming up with things that Chris has said a few seconds before he says them. But like
my secret sonners who've already read this last week's blog. Yeah, I saw. Yeah, UFO, lots of that there. I saw a couple of questions. So awesome. Excuse me. Yeah, and before we get there, I did not know this because I was reading your blog, but you were neighbors with the founder of Wayfair, Chris?
Yeah.
Wow. Sometimes I think reality changes as you write things or as you go down rabbit holes. It's like, what are the odds?
He, well, that's the other thing too, because there's a very strange connection between Ghislaine Maxwell and Wayfair, because she was living in the heart of Lovecraft country in Manchester by the Sea, right on Cape Ann there, with a guy named Scott Borgensen, who started this company called, what is it called again? Let me just check my notes here. But the company that he started, their headquarters is only a couple blocks away from Wayfair's offices. Where did he, hello, sir?
No, he's just going for something there.
Sorry,
I had to let the kitty out.
That's right. No, I know the feeling. So so Ghislaine's, it's rumored that she's married to this guy called Scott Borgensen, and he has a company called Cargometrics, and their offices are just a couple blocks away from Wayfair's offices in the Back Bay. And it's funny because in the book, He Will Live Up in the Sky, which everybody needs to read immediately if you really want to understand what's happening this year, right?
You want to be prepared. I'm afraid if I read it, it's going to change. But yeah, your book is it's prophetic. It's
So the story ends in this sort of secret lair in the Back Bay of Boston. I'm not giving spoilers there because it's got to end somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing that I thought was really strange. So there's just I think just 2 or 3 places that my characters travel to in Boston, and both of them have Wayfair offices there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, one is on Boylston Street, and the other one is in the Back Bay. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. Oh, the other interesting thing too is that I believe the one in the Back Bay is on St. James Street. So that ties into like Little St. James and Jeffrey Epstein and so on. So it's just things have just been like happening so quickly and so strangely. But anyway, back to your original question. Yeah, I did live 3 doors down from what's his name? Stephen Coney, who's the I guess the co-founder of Wayfair. And when I looked into this whole situation, I didn't get the sense that if there is anything going on, and I think, the story seems to have died down a bit, but if there is or was anything going on, I don't think that this guy who, my former neighbor, who I didn't know personally because I'm a few years older than him, but if there's anything going on, I doubt that he has anything to do with it, because the guy, his co-founder, like sits on the board of the Federal Reserve in Boston, and they're involved with like the Boys and Girls clubs, like all these, it's just one thing after another, like one red flag after another. It really is. So again, I haven't really looked into that, but that was a very strange story. And it had like, when I was looking at that story, it always had like a Videodrome vibe to me. You saw the movie Videodrome, right?
Yeah, a long time ago, yeah.
But it's just like, James Woods is watching TV and he just sort of stumbles upon this like really bizarre, weird, like snuff show or something. And it's like, there are just some rabbit holes that you can fall into that you really wish you never noticed, So again, I don't know if there's any truth to it, but there certainly is a lot of very strange evidence.
But but as you write, what's stranger is the reaction. It's almost like, this was immediate. It's like they had all these articles to debunk it like within hours. I've never seen anything so fast.
That
Usually
was really
they dismiss.
weird. Yeah, that was really weird, because it was just somebody who just posted it on Reddit.
No.
And I think it was like our conspiracy, right? And how many people post how many theories on that thing a day? Like, who cares, right? But it's like the entire establishment press just went into crisis mode. It was like they circled the wagons immediately. So that's the kind of thing that, those are the kind of things that I look for. You can interpret information all the ways that you want to, and a lot of people just will manufacture evidence if they can't find it. But it's when things like that happen, you wonder, like, why did that happen? Like, why did they care about some stupid thread on a Reddit board? It really was instantaneous. So I just couldn't help but wonder, given the proximity of Wayfair to Cargometrics and the connection to Ghislaine Maxwell, I wonder if she is just feeding the FBI information. Yeah. And there's the other weird thing too, where they'd asked Trump about her, and he said a couple times, like, I wish her well, I wish her well. And there's a whole big meltdown about that. But the way I interpreted that is that he wishes her well because she flipped, and she's feeding FBI, NSA, DIA, Homeland Security, whoever you can name, that she's feeding them information. That was my interpretation of that. I could be wrong, but that's because, he could have just said, I'm not going to comment on that. It's an ongoing case. It has nothing to do with me, blah, 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 blah. But he made a point of saying that. And, I can never figure out Trump out. I really try to pay as little attention to Trump as I can. And I don't understand these people who hate him and just pour and obsess over every syllable he writes on Twitter. It's just bizarre to me. But yeah, it seemed to me, in light of the connection that, even if it is tangential, but that connection and just the absolute meltdown that all the usual press subjects, media subjects went into. Just
Yeah, I mean,
that was
Snopes
just
had an
very-
article within 24 hours that next afternoon. I mean,
and the way the headlines were all worded, it was all like, this is bullshit, these conspiracy nuts are, lying about this, like putting in all the buzzwords, like, so anybody who would just sort of scan the headlines and not pay attention to it, it's all that neurolinguistic processing or programming where they, hit all those buzzwords. I mean, I think that form of magic is losing its power because of overuse, but it just seemed to me that they really just wanted to shut this thing down. And I'm just thinking, like, why?
Yeah.
Why do they want to shut? Like, who cares? Like, first of all, why are they going out of their way to defend this Wayfair company? To be honest with you, I had never heard of them before this.
Never heard of them until this time.
And it just was very odd and very strange. But you know what? It makes sense because it happened in July 2020. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to do a share screen and we'll get started with the slides. You guys let me know if you can see my screen as I am hitting it right now. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
All right. Where is I got to go to the beginning.
There you go.
There's Chris's. I got to go to slide number one.
That's the end, right?
Yeah, I was going to end with, well, we'll promote it at the end. And now, get the book. Present. All right, Chris, slide number one.
Yeah, so
Cover.
this is when I first got started on this story, right? And the thing that really started this ball rolling was realizing that she was living so close to where Aleister Crowley spent the summer of 1916 with a woman called Avalon Adams, who was actually at the time was a very well-known, I guess she was an astrologer, just sort of one of these celebrity occultist people that sort of you saw a lot of, right, in the early 20th century. You saw a lot of these people because I think a lot of it, the theosophy was really feeding into this, and before that, spiritualism. But so she was living very close to where Aleister Crowley was living, about 45 minutes, which, in rural New Hampshire, 45 minutes is basically across the street, right? And then it turned out, and I couldn't believe this connection when I heard about it, is that it turned out that her sister, Christine, was married to the son of Frank Molina, who started Jet Propulsion Laboratories with Jack Parsons. So she had, very close, let's see how many degrees of separation is that. So her sister, her brother-in-law, and her sister's father-in-law. So that's 4 degrees of separation away from Jack Parsons. I mean, what are the odds, right? Just really amazing to me. I couldn't believe that.
Incredible.
So that sort of changed the whole focus of my work on the blog over the past month.
And nobody had noticed this on any of the occult scholars, or?
Well, I don't think any of the occult scholars noticed it, but it had showed up in a couple articles on like BuzzFeedy kind of,
Oh, really?
Those when they were talking about Ghislaine and they were talking about her family, because her family is a whole other story, her father, just the whole situation is just so fraught and complex. And she's a piece of work too. I guess Maria Farmer, who was involved, with the whole Epstein Island thing, had said that, Ghislaine was really the one running it, that Jeffrey Epstein was just kind of a dope who was in it for the cheap sex, but she was really the one operating. And then,
Wow.
You read about like apparently she was a very extraordinarily sexually aggressive woman, a nymphomaniac. So I really wouldn't be surprised if they, you know, it's something that I haven't been able to nail down quite yet. It's something like I can sense it in my sinuses. You know, when I know I'm onto some sort of connection, when I know that there's, you know, buried treasure, my sinuses, I always start to feel this pressure in my sinuses. And I've been feeling that pretty constantly over the past month. I know that there's some connection between Ghislaine and Epstein and some sort of occultism, probably some sort of sex magic, something similar to Thelema, but maybe a little more hardcore, but I just haven't found it yet.
Oh, I'm sure it's coming. All right. Want to go to the second slide, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they look like such a happy couple. All right. So, how do we do this?
She's got a Navy fetish too. You can see that she's wearing sort of a quasi, and she's actually got a submarine license, which I just thought,
Oh,
like,
wow.
Yeah.
wow, that's really strange. Like, who the hell has a submarine license?
Lordy. All right. All right.
Yeah. Well, there she is on Prince Andrew's. Who's he even married to now? Was that the other throne meant for Sarah Ferguson? I'm not exactly sure.
I'm not sure.
But this was several years back. She and Spacey had taken up in Buckingham Palace and taken Prince Andrew and whoever his consort would have been, or maybe it would have just been empty at the time. I'm not exactly sure, but they look very comfortable there. And then, you know, we certainly see that they seem to be a king and queen of something, right? I'm not exactly sure what, but Spacey is a boy. What a fascinating character. I think he is like the true real life Kaiser Soze. I really do. I'm serious. I really think that guy is not somebody to be trifled with. I think that he's not just like another.
No, all his accusers and witnesses are falling dead and nobody seems to bat an eyelash. Does anybody see? It's straight out of the movies.
He's a supervillain. He is Lex. It's funny he played Lex Luthor because he is Lex Luthor. You know, he's like the real Lex Luthor. Listen, because reality has just become so fungible. If he ends up in the White House, don't be surprised.
Yeah.
Like, for real. Like, if he actually becomes president, just don't be surprised by that.
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah. You think Hillary hires him for her work?
I think Hillary's terrified of him, to be honest with you. I think she doesn't mess with him.
All right. Do we go to a map, slide 3?
Right. So this was the alignments that I was talking about, that I was just like, wow, the way these things line up. So at the top, you have the Betty and Barney Hill UFO abduction, right? And there's a marker there. The state put up a highway marker up in near Indian Head Lake Resort. And about 35 minutes down the highway, you have Hebron, where Crowley summered with Avalon Adams, and also wrote into the New York Times. You know, this is something I mentioned in the book. It's just like, it's so surreal to me to like be looking at this map, because this is the news, and this is all kind of things that I was touching on in my book, right? And I started writing 5 years ago. A lot of this kind of New Hampshire stuff was written back in 2015. So anyhow, there's Aleister Crowley, and he had written into the New York Times because he was assaulted by ball lightning in his house that just came right through the walls. You know, hey, listen, Aleister, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, right? You know, if you want to manifest things, you go up to a place in New Hampshire, you're gonna, you know, they're gonna manifest in your house. So, and then there's Ghislaine Maxwell down in Bradford, arrest on World UFO Day. And of course, you know, the so-called extraterrestrials that Barney and Betty Hill had described, and the drawing that Crowley had done of Lamb, you know, are not entirely dissimilar, right? You know, they're both in that general archetype of the alien gray as we know it, right? And so I was thinking about the Jack Parsons thing, and I know that his family were from a town outside of Springfield, Massachusetts. And there it is. Betty and Barney Hill, 61, Crowley, 16, Ghislaine Maxwell, just, a few weeks ago. And then Jack Parsons, whose birth name is Marvel, was not born there. He was born shortly after they moved to Los Angeles, but that's where they were living. And that's where both of them were born and raised. That part of Springfield, which was incorporated into its own town. So I was just looking at it and I'm thinking, like, what are the odds that
So wild. So wild.
Yeah, for those 4 points to show up in that kind of alignment, that's very 2020.
But having said that, isn't upper state New York in the Northeast just a hotbed of portals and psychic energies? I know Mitch Horowitz wrote about it and others have said. I mean, what's up with your side of the world, Chris, and yours, Vance?
The Headless Horseman.
Yeah, right. Sleepy Hollow. Mitch has talked about the Burnt Out District, which is west.
Right.
That's in Western New York. The Fox sisters, spiritualism, and all sorts of, where Joseph Smith was originally born and raised and had his visionary experience. New England, I don't know. It's a very ancient land. People have been living there for a very long time.
And calling spirits and other shit. Yeah.
Yeah. I encountered a leprechaun in my living room when I was living up there. So,
wow.
What can you say, I don't know. It's a strange world, and that's a very strange place. And I think there's a good reason that Lovecraft, who traveled quite a bit all over the place, was so particularly fascinated by that end of the world. He had written, I believe he had only written one story based in New Hampshire, and that was at Mystery Hill, which is American Stonehenge, which unbelievably, the guy, the naval commander, David Sex Fraser, who took the so-called Tic Tac video, he lives right near American Stonehenge, and he's originally from Ohio, so it's very interesting to have, for him to have ended up there.
Wow.
There's something going on up there. I don't know what it is. I mean, my first really good UFO sighting with my wife and my daughter was
New Hampshire.
Not far from here.
Wow.
I was on my way to my grandmother's 100th birthday party, and we just crossed the border, and we saw this plane that had obviously just taken off from Manchester Airport, and it was being like menaced by 2 orange orbs. And we, it wasn't that far over our heads. It was only a few hundred feet over our heads, and we got a real good look at it. And those things, were unwholesome. That's the only word I can use to describe, like the sickly orange color. But it definitely seemed to me like they were trying to make the plane crash. So, I mean, who the hell knows?
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Sled number 4. What do we have here?
Okay, so this is interesting. So, Bradford, where Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested, Hebron, again, Indian Head Lake, and then Conway, which, let me see how far that would be. That would be about maybe 30 miles from the Barney and Betty Hill area, and also maybe similar distance from where Crowley was living. And that's where that guy was arrested. And that's also where Hillary Clinton made her UFO declaration. And interesting to note too that, John Podesta, who's been a big UFO booster for since the 90s, was her campaign manager, and he's also involved with Tom DeLonge and this whole To the Stars Academy thing. He's been keeping a low profile for a while now. I know that the Podesta group was, I think they were dissolved because of something to do with improper representation of foreign governments and stuff like that. So, I mean, that was done very quietly, but I believe that the Podesta Brothers group has been dissolved. But, and then following that down, there's America's Stonehenge, and then there's Manchester by the Sea, where Ghislaine Maxwell was reportedly living with Scott Borgensen. And that is the ground zero of Lovecraft country and Cape Ann. And Elliot Maine, who was this guy that I've been looking at for a while now, this Rear Admiral Herbert Knowles, no relation, who seems to have had his fingers in a lot of UFO pies, and he was also a NICAP board member. So, but he had a very interesting kind of take. His whole view of UFOs was not quite so nuts and bolts. It was more along the neo-theosophical, I guess something that maybe Keel or Jacques Vallée, would have their own take on. But this guy was a true believer, and I think that he was probably had some background in theosophy, or maybe his wife did. But channeling and automatic writing, very, very much in that demilitarized zone between ufology and spiritualism.
Wow, good stuff. All right. Shall we go to slide 5?
Okay, yeah, and this is what I'm talking about. So the center of this radius here, where all these arrows are emerging from, is where this Rear Admiral Knowles was living. And his neighbor was, this is relatively obscure ufological event today, but was actually pretty big deal back in the day. It was this woman named Frances Swan, who was this guy, this admiral's neighbor, and she claimed to be channeling aliens from this civilization called Alpha. And at one point she was taken down to Washington, and she reportedly summoned, she was put into this trance, and they said, well, can you tell these UFO people to appear before? And apparently, reportedly a UFO appeared out the window. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not going to make any kind of claims as to the veracity of that. But, he's not far, just a couple of hours from Glen Cove, where Andrea Puharich was doing his 9 channelings, right? So I'm almost convinced that he was involved in that somehow. I'm not exactly sure how, but I very strongly believe that he was. But he was also the harbor master for the U.S. Navy during Operation Paperclip. And a lot of people don't realize is that that's where, all the German scientists, or many of the German scientists, were flown into, was Boston Harbor. And they landed at the Naval Air Station in Squantum. And Squantum Squantum is an interesting place because that's, we talk about people hiding out, right? So Ghislaine Maxwell is found hiding out in the middle of New Hampshire, right? And Whitey Bulger, who Ghislaine would probably enjoy having, some conversations with. He's dead now. He was killed in prison, contract hit.
Oh boy.
A couple of years ago. But, he was basically running Boston with his brother. He was the underground and his brother was the overground. His brother was the president of the Massachusetts Senate. But there was this whole big thing. If you've seen the movie The Departed, did you see The Departed?
Yeah. Jack Nicholson.
That was kind of based on this, because it turns out that the FBI was using him as an informant, allegedly, and they were covering for all the crimes that he was committing. He was basically getting away literally with murder, and then he was something happened where the FBI agent who was his handler was arrested, and he allegedly went on the lam, and everybody said he was in Paris and this place and that place, and he was in Squantum, where Operation Paperclip planes landed. And a lot of people don't realize this. If you've seen the movie The Departed, the Jack Nicholson character is based on Whitey Bulger, and also Black Mass with Johnny Depp. He's more explicitly about Whitey Bulger, but Whitey Bulger was a real hardcore MK Ultra subject.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was thrown in, I believe it was in Folsom in California. He ended up in prison, and they basically just dosed him with like extremely high doses of LSD for like weeks.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and then we all know how that turned out. But anyway, these are so just in this radius. You talk about this area, right? So a lot of these, if people are interested in ufology, I mean, you're gonna know the Allagash abductions. You're gonna know about the 9. You're gonna know Betty Barney Hill. You're gonna know about the incident at Exeter. You're gonna know about the Tom Reed family abductions, the Hudson Valley UFOs in '83. The Wanacue Reservoir event is lesser known, but there was some really good photographs taken there. And of course, Operation Paperclip, the great UFO wave that both Jean Keel and Jacques Vallée wrote about in Passport to Magonia and Operation Trojan Horse, 1966. That's in this area, Eastern Massachusetts. Betty Andreasen, very well-known contactee in the the UFO craze post communion. And then of course the Sage radar station at Fort Hero and Montauk, from the whole Montauk lore, Montauk mythos. And then of course Shag Harbor, you're right across the sound there, in Nova Scotia, which is a very famous, that a UFO was said to crash in the ocean outside of Shag Harbor. So, I mean, these are all very, very well-known events in the ufological canon, and they all happened within a 200-mile radius of where this guy was living. So.
Wow.
Wanacue was the town I lived in when I was in high school. I was there in that town in 1966 until I left for college.
No kidding.
Yep. I didn't see a damn single UFO though, and I wanted to because I knew.
Or a Nazi or anything. Wow.
You remember about that story though, right? You remember about the Wanacue reservation situation.
I don't remember the details. I've been there. It's like not much of a thing. It's just underneath between Newton and Jefferson Township, Milton, all that in there. But people saw the UFOs. I don't think there was any third kind encounters there, but there are a lot of sightings there. In fact, they went on for years. It wasn't just one incident.
Yeah, well, somebody back in the 90s, maybe it was the early 2000s, in that range, had put up this very strange website saying that there was a portal there. There's like an interdimensional portal there. It reminded me of the fake website in Twin Peaks: The Return. You remember the Matthew Lillard character? Do you remember that whole subplot? And then they put like a pseudo GeoCities website up, and but somebody had put a website up about that, and I actually contacted him, and he was very brusque and didn't want to talk about it. But he had a number of photographs that he'd taken up there of weird lights and manifestations and stuff. So back in the glory days of the internet. Right?
Yeah, right.
Haven't you found that like information is just getting good information is just getting harder and harder to find on the internet?
Very much so.
That's because bad information is easier and easier to find on the internet.
Yeah,
it's being jammed.
It's true. It really
or is that sort of vile? What did it say? It's 90% true, but they put that 10% of misinformation to throw you off. I forget what the technique is called, but it's not just...
Anyway, so that plays a part in this whole story, because I really have to wonder. And just the fact that she was there and she was within this alignment, it makes me wonder if she knew that she was in this alignment and looked specifically for a house in this alignment. I have a very hard time believing that she isn't up to some strange occulty kind of shenanigans.
Oh, there's no doubt she was doing something in that house. So question is why they got to her when they got to her.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next slide. Maybe she gave the Antichrist of the moon child birth or something. Who knows? Let's see. And now we go with some Parsons and Hubbard. Oh my. Cameron and Hubbard and Parsons. Oh my.
So you talk about how like reality has kind of shifted. It's interesting because L. Ron Hubbard moved to New Jersey when he wrote Dianetics, and he was living in a town called Bayhead. And I think he was living in that town because he wanted to find a house with the address 666. And I believe it was 666 West Street in Bayhead. And a few summers ago, my son and some of his friends had rented a house down there. And they were like 2 or 3 blocks away from that house. I was just like, whoa, this is really interesting. Because I'd studied that house for a while. Because Hubbard is just such a strange character and had so many really strange beliefs. But the thing that when I have talked about Parsons is that there's a lot of lore and a lot of mythology, particularly around the Babylon working. And I don't want to burst anybody's bubbles or anything, but Marjorie Cameron didn't just show up magically. She wasn't summoned through some magical ritual. I mean, Marjorie Cameron, first of all, was naval intelligence, and she was doing top secret work in Washington. So she was pretty highly placed. She was doing cartography work, which at the time was, and probably still is in some ways, incredibly important and incredibly secret. So she had very high clearance. And she didn't just show up in Pasadena on a whim. She showed up in Pasadena because her father and her brother were both working at Jet Propulsions. So it's interesting to me when I started to think about, my brain is always looking for alignments. It's always looking for connections. And I started to see like Marjorie Cameron very much in a similar light to Ghislaine Maxwell. The more and more you look at them, they seem remarkably similar. They both have like a strong connection to the ocean and an obsession with the Navy, drawn to these shady, strong male figures. Jack Parsons, he had a lot of problems, and I think a lot of them had to do with his upbringing. But he was a very strong at least he presented himself as a very strong, charismatic figure. And I think that, that's something that Ghislaine Maxwell looked for as well. But the thing is that both L. Ron Hubbard and Marjorie Cameron were naval intelligence. So I don't think they were just showing up in Pasadena to hang out with Jack Parsons on a lark. I think one of the reasons is that Jet Propulsion's first clients were the U.S. Navy. You know what I mean? So their first clients were the U.S. Navy. So I think these people were sent because they heard that this guy Parsons was a little weird. So they sent Hubbard and Cameron out to see what's what. And I think both of them sort of drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak. But, the Navy is just so involved in all this kind of business. Had a huge presence in NICAP. Were very much involved in 50s ufology. So I think there are a lot of interesting connections there that bear more looking into. But again, Marjorie Cameron, she didn't just appear there because she was called by some signal from the occultic ether. She was, I think she was placed. And I think her family, were placed in his orbit because this was of the highest sensitivity, right? I mean, missiles and so on. I mean, this is the start of the Cold War era, isn't it? Right? They're very worried about atomic bombs and the development of missiles, the V2, Werner von Braun, which takes us back to Massachusetts and that whole general area. So, and the interesting thing too is that so Tom DeLonge was in a band called Blink-182, and that's where he made his bones. That's what he's best known for. And his partner, his father, the partner, Tom DeLonge's partner in starting Blink-182, his father was a missile designer for the U.S. Navy. So, there is that connection again, right? I mean, it shouldn't surprise people because if you really look at the world and the way the world is actually run and not the way it's run in people's fantasies, the U.S. Navy runs the world. I mean, if the U.S. Navy went on strike for a week, the entire world economy would collapse forever. And I don't think a lot of people realize that it's the U.S. Navy that keeps the sea lanes open. So they are. I mean, they have an Air Force that's. I don't know if it's larger than the actual Air Force, but I know it performs more actual combat missions than the U.S. Air Force. So the Navy is something that not a lot of people pay attention to, and they should, because it's very, very powerful and it's very influential.
Mm. And do you have a stance on whether Parsons accidentally killed himself, was assassinated?
There are a couple different theories that I think hold water. I don't think it was an accident. I think he was too experienced. You know, they're trying to say, well, he was a big speed freak, so he sweated a lot and all that kind of thing. Right. There are a couple pretty good, solid suspects in my mind. First of all, he was planning to defect and move to Israel and work for the IDF, design missiles for the IDF. So I think there were people who did not want that to happen. But he was also an expert on explosive cases, you know, for the LAPD. And there was actually somebody, I believe it was a cop, who was involved in some sort of racket where he was planting bombs. And Parsons testified at his trial and got the guy convicted and sent up. And he was released from prison right around that time, early 50s, 52 or so. So I definitely don't believe he killed himself. And I definitely believe, you know, he blew himself up trying to build a homunculus. I think all these stories are just kind of silly nonsense. I think that it was one of those two, to be honest with you.
All right, cool. Let's go to the next slide. Very interesting stuff. And here we are, Parsons.
Yeah, that's Jack Parsons with Betty, who we started banging when she was a teenager. She moved in. So Parsons was married to Sarah Northrop, who everybody called Betty, older sister. And she moved in with them when she was 15. And this is the parsonage area. This is when he was running the Agape Lodge out of his home and having all sorts of Hollywood people and science fiction writers and scientists and everything come over for these sex parties. And she was involved in this pretty young, which kind of got me thinking about Epstein. I mean, it's Epstein on a much smaller scale, but just the fact that there was this connection. There was also somebody who filed a complaint. 15-year-old boy had complained that he'd been raped at one of these Agape Lodge meetings. I don't think the case was ever prosecuted, but I'm not exactly sure why he would make that up in that time period, right? It's not something that you would want to brag about. So Parsons started banging Betty when she was 17 because she was living with them, and but she in turn dumped him for Hubbard, and they both, you know, Hubbard and Betty took off with all of Jack Parsons' money, and that was the whole thing when he showed up in Florida and made invocations to Bart Cibola something, you know, and scuttled their ships. I mean, it was all very, very weird and bizarre. I mean, Parsons, he seems to have become sort of like a folk hero to a lot of people, but he's not somebody that I have a tremendous amount of admiration for, to be honest.
80 character, huh?
I think that he's been romanticized, and a lot, you know, that television series didn't help, of course. But yeah, I don't think that he was an admirable guy, you know. And if you read a lot of his journal writings and stuff, he seemed to be pretty screwed up in the head. And you know, he created the technology that's been responsible for the deaths of millions of people. So there you go.
Yeah. Dark forces. All right, next slide.
Right. So this takes us back. We're hopping around here. I guess I didn't send you these in order, right? But this is Roy Den Hollander, obvious, flamingly obvious spook. Doesn't even try to hide it. But he was like a media personality. He was making the rounds in all these comedy shows, and he claimed to be an anti-feminist lawyer and stuff, and he was on the war path. You know, it was like the He-Man Women Haters Club from the Three Stooges kind of thing. But he was working in Russia, and
for the audience that might know, this is the guy who shot the son of the judge.
The son, of Judge Salas, who was 4 days before assigned to hear the Epstein Deutsche Bank money laundering case. You know, this is like, we're becoming, you know, a gangster state. We're becoming like basically Banana Republic, because, and people buy, you know, people say, oh, he was some embittered incel, or, you know, MRA, or men going their own MGTOW, you know, all these kind of stories, just absolutely absurd.
Well, even on Twitter, you're like, this is right out of the playbook. You knew who they were going to blame it on, right? The disgruntled right-winger or something.
Yeah, exactly. And they called him a Trump supporter because he contributed $25 to Trump's campaign. So there are all these kind of stories. They're saying, oh, he's dying of cancer and he was bankrupt and all this kind of stuff. Maybe, I don't know. If that's true, that might explain why he took this job to, you know, this contract killing job that he bungled and then got shot in the head for. And again, this is an interesting kind of thing. You know, you talked about how Wayfair just became this huge story, like hours after that thread showed up on Reddit, right?
Right.
And this guy, like, he was being served up as the patsy hours after the shootings.
Right, yeah.
You know, like all of us, oh yeah, we know who it is, and he killed himself up in Liberty, New York, which is a drive, and another place that I've been to that's in the middle of nowhere. So this is all just very strange. And he was working for Kroll, and Kroll is, you know, either a CIA cutout or, you know, what they call the private CIA. And he was actually, you know, this news just came out today. Turns out this guy who shot the woman who was going to hear the Deutsche Bank case was working with Deutsche Bank in Russia in the 90s, you know, because all these Russian banks that were declaring bankruptcy were hiding money. And apparently this guy was working in Russia, helping Deutsche Bank find all the money that was being squirreled away by these Russian bankers. So, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Why? You know, this is like, and you notice that like the media dropped this story like a hot potato as soon as people started getting the scent of this stuff.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. They have no shame.
Pretty typical.
Yeah. All right.
Oh yeah, and this seems like ancient history now, right? Steve Bing.
Yes. It looks like
Bing, who took a swan dive from 10,000 Century City, the 10,000 building in Century City. And again, not to like get too, you know, I mean, this is going to like start to sound like really stupid and contrived, but I was in Century City last summer, and I was in Century City.
I'm sorry, maybe you're the killer, Chris.
Yeah, right.
That'd be like a plot twist. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, I was in Century City last summer, and I was involved in this like legal case and stuff. And it was like just a couple blocks from where this guy took a dive. And he also lives near that building, the what is it, creative artist building that has the big all-seeing eye in the garden and everything, that weird building, weird kind of Illuminati Masonic thing in the courtyard. But this guy was very tight with Clinton, very tight with Epstein, very tight with all these people. And, you know, he takes this dive just like just a few days before, you know, Ghislaine is arrested. And he was involved with all these Hollywood people. He was bankrolling these films that Robert Zemeckis was doing, like Polar Express and Beowulf, you know, horrible movies, just really disturbing, uncanny valley animation, but he was putting the money behind that. And then he did his own movie called Kangaroo Jack, which has sort of become a cult movie because it's so horrible.
It is.
Yeah, but he's just a really strange character. And
he was just depressed over the pandemic, right?
Yeah, that was
how much, yeah.
Like, they're not even trying. That's like, you know what that's like? F you. You want to know how he died? F you. He was depressed because of COVID, right? It's just like, shut the hell up. Who the hell
still rich, but I'm just gonna kill myself.
Yeah, because he couldn't go to like some private island where nobody was wearing masks and everybody's screwing and drinking, you know, all the live long day and not worrying a single bit about COVID, right?
Yeah. So
that was just it. That was just so clearly like they're probably just afraid that this guy was the weak link, and boom, out the door. But he was also involved romantically with Elizabeth Hurley, and it turned out that he was the father of her son, and there was a big paternity thing. So I mean, all these people are just really skewed.
Sick and depraved. Oh boy! All right. Okay,
yeah, we're really out of order here. I'm sorry, I couldn't get onto that slides thing and get these things in order, but you know, I'm sure the audience can follow along. We're hopping around a little bit, but we can just dispatch with this pretty quickly. Ghislaine Maxwell was apparently living in Manchester by the Sea. This is the Lovecraft country map, and you have Marblehead, Salem, Kingsport, Arkham, you know, Innsmouth, all these real and non-real locations in Cape. That area that you see here, just north of Salem, is called Cape Ann. And I don't know, like, can I just say this? I mean, I feel stupid saying it, but we used to summer in Gloucester, not far from. So if you look, see that Gloucester there, and then you see sort of that bay, and you see that island there.
Where? Oh yeah, I see it. Yeah, okay. To the east, northeast.
Yeah, so I think that's the beach. Maybe it's one of these beaches. I think it's the lower one. That's Lookout Harbor, I think it's called, Lookout Harbor. And we were a couple blocks from there, but we were also on the far end of the Babson farm, which was where the ghost Indian story happened in colonial times, where, you know, these ghostly figures of Indians and French soldiers, you know, dressed up in uniform, were seen to emerge from the salt marshes there and menace the local burghers. But we had done seances at the cemetery there, and we didn't realize that it was on Babson Farm territory, so that didn't turn out too good, but that's a whole other show. Anyway.
Wow, you're going some adventures, Chris.
Okay, yeah. So we're back on Ghislaine. That's her father, Robert Maxwell, aka Jan Hawk, who was set up by the British government after the war as a media baron, and fancied himself sort of this emperor figure. Spent all sorts of money. Turns out he was hundreds of millions of dollars of debt. When he died, he mysteriously died, fell into the ocean off the Canary Islands off his boat called the Lady Ghislaine. She was very close to him. I get a very weird feeling that they might have had an incestuous relationship. I don't know why. I just kind of.
There's the boat angle, right?
Yeah, there's the boat again.
Nautical.
Yep. Yeah, and she had like a very close relationship with him, and it turned out when he died that they found out that he was embezzling hundreds of millions of dollars from the pension funds of his employees and stuff. Just a real, and he was spying for Israel. He was giving a state funeral in Israel when he died, spying for Mossad. But he was also, working with CIA and KGB, and I mean, he was just one of these. I mean, he really was like a John le Carre novel in and of himself.
Wow. Slide 12.
Okay, so here's we can just go through this pretty quickly. That's Parsons on second to left, and the short guy on the right is Frank Molina, who is the father-in-law of Ghislaine Maxwell's sister. So there's that connection.
All right, cool.
Oh, and this is just, this is a tweet I saw that Steve Bing was one of the driving forces to I can't read but he apparently had pressured Graydon Carter of Vanity Fair not to publish a piece on Maxwell and Epstein. So again, yeah, I don't think that he was depressed over COVID. I think he was depressed because he was thrown out a window onto the pavement from 20 flights up. I think that's why he was depressed.
No cure for that depression, unfortunately. Yeah, we got Maxwell.
Yeah, this is a very
famous
strange
picture.
Yeah, this there are a lot of theories that this is a Photoshop job, that she was trying to lead people to believe that she was in California. This is a
because of the In-N-Out burger.
Yeah, this is an In-N-Out burger in Universal City, and I guess they were trying to lead people away from that area. But there are some people believe that she was Photoshopped, and she was also reading this book about, you know, how CIA agents die. You know, very clearly seen as kind of a threatening, or just one of these signals. You know, similar to what Kevin Spacey had done in his YouTube videos.
Right. Hey, speaking of.
Yeah, there's Kevin Spacey, the future president of the United States, or the whatever confederation rises up in the ashes of the United States of America, holding his Elizabeth coronation cup, his Queen Elizabeth coronation cup, quite ostentatiously, you know, sending a little signal to the Queen,
the lizard people, saying, if I go down, yeah, full house of cards, no pun intended, comes down with me. And you know, not long after that, William Little, who had filed and assault charges against Spacey in Nantucket, had you know, there you go, that's that same corner of the world again that seems to be showing up. Dropped charges. And then also, I really hate to say this, because so I used to work for New England Comics. They were they started out as a comic store, and then they published The Tick, which became like a TV show and a cartoon series and everything like that. But I worked for their first store, which was in the Patriot Building, across the street from the Universalist Church, where the Adams, the president, John and John Quincy, were buried at the time. I think they were moved later on. But just across, there's like a little highway divider there, and just across that highway divider is the Stop and Shop building. And another one of these people who was set to testify against Spacey was unfortunately, and I'm sure absolutely coincidentally, hit by a car and killed, you know, at that crosswalk. So of course, another stroke of luck for him. I know.
Kaiser Soze. I'm going to call him Kaiser Spacey, I think. I think that one.
Yeah, we got
again, we're out of order, but this is, you know, this is the story that broke after Ghislaine was arrested about Deutsche Bank being fined $150 million. And I don't think they care about the fine. I don't think that's pocket, you know, it's not even pocket change to them. I think what they're worried about is the other stuff coming out. And then, of course, that emerges in North Brunswick with the assassination, or the attempted, I would say the attempted assassination of Judge Salas and the murder of her husband and son.
Did the husband die? I thought he survived. Oh, the son died. All right.
Oh, that's right. The son died, yeah. And this is where Ghislaine, again, we're out of order, but this is, you know, talking about Lovecraft, this is, she's at the MDC in Brooklyn, which is near the Greenwood Cemetery, where they filmed, if you've ever watched The King of New York, one of my favorite films with Christopher Walken, and Wesley Snipes, Lawrence Fishburne, all sorts of other people. The funeral scenes were shot at the Greenwood, big, beautiful, picturesque cemetery on the water there. But, you know, she's right across the way from Red Hook, and anybody who's read their Lovecraft will know the significance of that. But oddly enough, Jeffrey Epstein's mailing address in the Virgin Islands was not Little St. James. It was a neighborhood called Red Hook. So there's Red Hook again. And it's just
Incredible.
the synchronicities showing up are just so,
Yeah, they keep going.
so bizarre. You know?
Of course, we have another death, another
Yes.
accident.
Yeah. So 3 people drowned in this pool at the same time. They said that it has a deep end. They didn't even call it a deep end. They said it a portion that was 7 feet deep. Now I'm looking at this pool and I'm looking at not only the outer shell here, but also the inner part of the shell and the reflections in the water. I don't see any indication of a deep end at all. I see a pool that's 3.5 feet deep. And, you know, they come up with a story because you can just lie now, you know, because nobody says anything. I mean, it's amazing that you know, you don't have to tell the truth anymore. It's just astonishing. But, you know, they were so confused by how 2 adults and 1 child could drown in this pool that they were investigating the electricity, you know, that maybe there was a short circuit on the electricity on the pump and something. And it you know, because these shells are a metal, they're aluminum, and maybe had electrified the water, and that, you know, but there was no indication of that, you know, because they would have had, you know, there would have been like physical rigor, there would have been symptoms, you know, post-mortem symptoms of electrocution. There was none of that. You know, somehow 3 people drowned in this 3.5-foot pool. And this is East Brunswick. You know, the Judge Sal's shooting was in North Brunswick. This is in East Brunswick. And this story really got my attention, not only because it's just so incredibly impossible, but this woman, Nisha Patel, who drowned. There was a woman who works for, or had worked for, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, whose name was also Nisha Patel. And there were a lot of stories going around that, you know, that she had drowned in this pool and had something to do with the Gates Foundation and things like that. I think if you're working for the Gates Foundation, you can probably afford a better swimming pool than that one, right? So, yeah, but it's just a very strange story because of the very high strangeness. And this is right around the time of the Bing snuff. So
Right.
Something's going on. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know what connection any of these people have, this Patel family has to anything, but yes.
My cousin used to be mayor of East Brunswick. No kidding. And he was on the
Wow.
city council. He
Yeah.
still lives around there somewhere.
Yeah. So, but you know, I mean, look at that pool. Nobody drowns in that pool.
No,
Maybe
that's
infants
typical. That's typical New East Coast pool for middle class people. You know, they all have those kind of things.
Yeah. Nobody drowned in that pool. I guarantee you. But whatever.
Yeah.
2020. Okay, so this is a map showing these alignments. So 120 Lease Hill Road is where the co-CEO, co-founder of Wayfair grew up. I lived 3 doors down from that house. There's the Trump National Golf Club, and that's basically his home away from home. That's where he goes on the weekends. That's his favorite place to go. And then the other side of that is Hampton, New Jersey, where the old Cull Germer estate was, where Aleister Crowley's ashes were buried back in the late 40s, maybe early 50s, I'm not sure. But that's an interesting, you know, little tidbit there. Not a lot of people would imagine that Aleister Crowley was buried in a cow pasture in the middle of central New Jersey, but there you go. And then again, down here we have the Judge family attacked, and the family that drowned in the 3.5-foot pool. And well, actually, no, wait, I guess that's, all right, so that's 78, but if you notice that 4 of these locations are on Route 287, so there you go.
Wow.
And at one point, Trump was across the way from the world headquarters of AT&T, where they had the giant Mithras statue that I've blogged about many times. That was right across the highway from Trump National. Bedminster, AT&T.
Now we bring some lower dark Sophia into this.
Yeah, doesn't this remind you like that? Like this is all I could think of was like Sheila in a gig here, you know, something like that, right? Some sort of pagan icon. So this is all the madness that's going on in Portland. I don't understand it, you know, where people are just hell bent on destroying their own city, and I don't know why when anybody would try to stop them. To be honest with you, I don't know why Trump is so worried about sending the federal troops in there. If they want,
They've been rioting for years now, steadily. I mean, Portland has riots all the time.
Yeah, if they want to destroy their own city, why should anybody stop them? You know.
Yeah.
But this again, this does seem very Sophia. This just it's just incredibly pagan, you know, or just pre-Christian or Gnostic. I mean, you name it. It's just such a strange photo op, you know.
And she was given the nickname something Athena. I forgot what it was.
Yeah, Athena. Which this doesn't seem like very Athena-esque behavior to me. It seems more Aphrodite, right?
More like a sewer siren, huh?
Yeah, that's sexy, huh? Having her foot on the
I'm thinking
manhole.
I'm thinking,
manhole. See, there you go.
Yeah, but
I'm thinking not one of those other primordial goddesses.
They renamed it to a woman hole.
Ooh, I'm not going near that. But this is, you know, just the general madness that we're sort of seeing, you know, all the violence and riots and neo-iconoclasm and just all this kind of stuff going on. You know, one thing that I've been talking about fairly consistently for the past few months is I definitely don't think there's going to be an election. And now, like, the mainstream is kind of picking up on that.
They have been recently, right?
Yeah, they've been kind of picking
You've been
up
calling it for at least a couple of months.
Yeah, I definitely don't think there's going to be an election. And, you know, they're blaming it on Trump, and Trump doesn't want to leave the White House. Like that. But
well, everything they're doing is trying to guarantee there's no election, you know, if you know what I mean. Make enough trouble so that it's chaotic. And so, you know, I think it's about power. It's about, you know, shifting power. They accuse the 3 fingers back rule is very enlightening.
Well, I think, you know, I don't really take like the political parties all that seriously. I generally think they're just fronts for other rulers. You know, one of the things that I found just so bizarre, and it really fed into the suspicion that we're not going to have an election, was around the time that they were doing the COVID shutdowns, the Continuity of Government Council was sent over to Cheyenne Mountain, you know, which is,
I heard that.
Yeah, where NATO and the Air Force, you know, I probably still, you know, had their, do you ever see that movie, Terminator 3, the one with Nick Stahl, when Nick Stahl played John Connor? Did you see that movie?
Terminator 3, yeah.
There's the female Terminator.
She's a female Terminator?
The blonde female in the leather suit. I believe that was, if not Cheyenne Mountain, then something similar to that. But, you know, it's all very 70s sci-fi, you know, when you hear that all the generals and admirals are in a deep underground bunker in Cheyenne Mountain, you start to get a little concerned. Maybe the, you know, things that are going on are not quite
what they seem.
Yeah.
Yay, Rose McGowan.
Yeah, Rose McGowan's getting very red pilled.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She was linking to a story by Whitney Webb, where
Whitney Webb's awesome too.
Yeah, they were talking about you know, Crowley was hired by Weinstein to go after Rose McGowan and a number of women who were filing complaints against him, and then this Black Cube organization and all these kind of people. And again, the Salas guy, you know, is very much involved in Kroll and Deutsche Bank and the CIA and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that was that was not some disgruntled, they were changing the story around too. It's like, oh, he's a, the judge heard a case of his 5 years ago. And they never really kind of went into detail on that. And then, oh, he's just, one of these MGTOW guys, and he's sexist and misogynistic. And like, they could not get their cover story straight. So they just dropped it.
Yeah. Now we were saying.
So this is the story that came out today, where that this Hollander guy was involved with Deutsche Bank and CIA. That's something we discussed earlier.
Poor lady lost her son. Jesus, these people have no heart.
So this is what I posted on today. So this month, like what I said before, this month begins with Ghislaine being arrested on World UFO Day. The head of MUFON arrested the next day, and now we have this full tilt media blitz from To the Stars. Yeah, it's just amazing to me. Somebody who's been following the UFO subject since the 80s, to just see like, and if you really want to get technical about it, 70s, because I was into all that Leonard Nimoy In Search of kind of stuff, and all those, ancient astronaut movies and all that kind of business. So, but the fact that New York Times has signed on to this, and Senator Harry Reid and Marco Rubio from Florida is now pushing this whole story. I mean, just all this stuff going on, and you just start to think like, I don't know, something's going on.
Yeah. And it's not the official narrative. We know that. So we end that little slide with, of course, He Will Live Up in the Sky for the audience.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely recommend it.
Yeah. All the stuff that we're talking about. When do we do that show? Is in January, right?
No. It was when the book came out in November 2000, okay. When the world was sort of normal.
Yeah. When it was only ragingly insane and not just debilitatingly insane. Yeah, so I mean, all this kind of stuff. I mean, because I talked about in the book, and again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers here, but talked about the plan to create like racial and political violence and street violence as part of this whole control mechanism. I talked about that in the book, and I talked about like, the woman who worked for the honey trap, where the intelligence agency was luring Boston politicians with underage girls for sex and everything like that. And that story was definitely early on in the, and I definitely was not thinking about like Maxwell and Epstein. I mean, I know that he had been arrested prior to that, but that was not something I was processing. And I forget what it was, but it was another news story that I was processing that I believe had something to do with a very similar case back in the 50s. And I'm just totally blanking on what I was kind of processing there. But, and the whole thing with New Hampshire and all this intelligence chicanery having to do with the paranormal and the highly weird and the highly strange going on in New Hampshire. There it is, folks. It's all in the book. You want to read about it? I was writing about it, a lot of the plotting was done early on in the process, and a lot of the rewrites had to do with character development and so on. But the basic building blocks of the plot were definitely in place early on, New Hampshire setting and sort of underground intelligence operations happening in New Hampshire, quite literally in some regards. So it's been an interesting experience, it's been an interesting experience to see this stuff manifest
come out
in the outer world. But I mean, I'm not going to make any claims to like clairvoyance or prescience or anything. I just think I was just been swimming in these waters and just noting the patterns for so long that it doesn't surprise me at all that this stuff would all sort of resurface this year, I guess you'd say.
Yes, indeed. And a good book. Let me stop the screen share. Sorry. Okay, let me get back here. Vance, I'm sure the audience has some questions from Chris after this fascinating journey.
Yes.
And
Disturbing journey.
Okay, we'll start with Social Observer, who was kind enough to contribute 5 buckaroos. He wants to know, Chris, why did Robert Maxwell change his name 3 or 4 times prior to settling on Robert Maxwell? Do you know?
Well, I think it's just pretty clear that he was an imported intelligence agent, and that's basically how they operate. You know, they take any number of aliases.
Right.
And, I believe that he was probably given that name when he was set up. He was set up after the war with a sort of obscure scientific publishing outfit that had been going bankrupt, and he was made, the owner of that. So you give him a name like Robert Maxwell, it sounds very authoritative, and
yeah, because you got to have the documents and all that stuff. So if people look into his identity, there's some paperwork in back of him, right?
I think it was pretty. Yeah, I think it was always known. I think his background wasn't exactly a secret, but I think, his stage name, let's call it, because I think that's exactly what it was. Was designed to give him that air of baronage, I guess you would say.
Yeah. Okay, I had another one. This is one of my favorite questions, because after we saw your presentation, question came up in my mind. Ed in the Valley wants to know if you're implying that the UFOs and all the people being accused and are involved in all this other stuff, that's my insertion there, are all connected, and well, obviously, right, you're connecting them, but can anyone just say it out loud? And my part of the question is, do you have a theory or working model as to how this all fits together? And what's your conception of the higher level entities that might be orchestrating these kinds of things?
Well, I think I said at the beginning that I've given up trying to make those kind of models. I've given up trying to.
There's no unified theory.
Yeah, unified weird theory, as I used to call it. It's interesting because we've come to know that science is deeply compromised, and that the overwhelming majority of science that's being published is false. It's fake. It's fraud. So should we really trust science? Should we, as non-scientists, try to apply scientific principles to our examination of all this phenomena? We're not going to have access to all the ins and outs, and there are a lot of people who can do good research and take interviews and stuff and get a pretty good sense of what's going on in the world of intelligence and so on. But, you're never going to know the whole story. You're only going to know pieces of it. And I don't try. I've been processing so much insanely impossible information over the past couple of years that I've just stopped trying to explain it. I don't even know if that is even.
Well, it must be something behind your motivation to keep associating these things. There's something in the back of your mind that says it must be important to notice, to collect the information, to draw the lines between the dots. And I have a sense you're still looking for something, even if you don't want to tell us what it is.
I don't.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I think it's become much more experiential for me now, and it's really more about unlearning things than trying to learn things. Like unlearning things, conceptions and worldviews that I once held that I realized were not my own, that they were instilled in me through conditioning, through programming. And but to be frank, with a lot of this stuff that that we've been talking about, one of the reasons why I've been paying attention to it is that it's touched on places like that I've walked, that I've been. North Brunswick, a very good friend of mine grew up there. I used to go over his house all the time, and then we'd drive down to Princeton and go to the Princeton Record Exchange. So I know North Brunswick. My son lived in New Brunswick. This guy, like I said, had lived in 3 doors down from me, this Wayfair guy. It it caught my attention because I knew these places. You know, when this shooter showed up in Liberty, I've been to Liberty. I think it's one of the only actual places in upstate New York that I've actually like spent any time in, was up in Liberty. So it just, you know, it caught my attention because I knew of it. You know, like the geography was fascinating to me because, you know, I don't like to travel. I don't like to go places. I really don't. I have like this weird thing where I just can't sleep if I'm in a hotel room or something. It's very uncomfortable for me. I hate going on airplanes. I just don't like to go places. But like just so many of the places that I've been to showing up in all these big news stores, it's just very curious to me because I haven't really been a lot of places.
They're coming to you.
Yeah.
All right, we got another question here. Thanks for that, by the way. I'm sure a lot of people appreciated that. Let's see. What do you think? This is from Nate, occult fan, our friend occult fan. What do you think of the tool predicting I'm going to just read this, the Rona with fear inoculum? Does that make sense to you?
You know, Nate had to bring up Tool, the band Tool.
Oh, the band Tool. Okay, predicting the Rona with fear inoculum.
Corona?
The coronavirus.
Well,
is that what he's talking about?
Yeah, Rona is a millennial term for coronavirus.
Oh man, I'm just too old to know that.
I think that is
like roids.
Yeah, I don't think that's nearly as impressive as Elizabeth Fraser predicting it in an album that was released in 1982 and then re-released the week of all the major, you know, when just everything was shut down in March. So I'm not really familiar with the Tool reference that he's making there, so I can't really comment on it.
And when did what album did she predict? 2020?
Well, it's on Garland's. You know, and first of all, Garland's and Corona are synonymous.
Right. It's the crown.
Yeah.
I see.
But the first song is Blood Woman, Blood Bitch. There's a Corona. There's a Corona swelling. Now, that just might sound nonsensical, but one of the things that emerged is that Corona's mechanism is causing the mechanism works in the blood and it causes swelling of like the blood vessels in the lungs and the respiratory. So it's like there's a coronavirus, a corona swelling, causing inflammation.
Okay.
So I mean, in the blood. So that's a song came out in 1982 and was released again that week in March when everything just went kerblooey.
Yeah.
I just finally got my unemployment, by the way, too.
You're kidding.
No, I'm serious. I just finally got my unemployment. I've been
Jesus.
After how long?
Just hoping I could keep the lights on. You know what I'm saying? I was like, boy, I hope I can keep the lights on before this. You know, I have this live stream with Miguel and Vance. I hope they don't turn the power off. And just like in the nick of time, I just got my.
Oh wow. Jesus. You got your Trump bucks, didn't you?
Yeah, I got my Trump bucks, but that was very late too. So yeah. And the industry that my day job has just been completely goodbye.
Really?
Yeah, it's goodbye. So
wow. Yeah, a lot of people are hurting with all this stuff.
yeah.
Here's another one.
What's that?
CIA docs. Do you know anything about the CIA documents discussing astral projection and holographic reality?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. What do you think?
I'm a big believer in all that kind of stuff. I just don't think it's as on demand as people tend to believe it is. So it's like I believe in all that stuff, and it's beyond question that the CIA were investigating it. And like what I said when we talked about the book is that, meeting Russell Targ and talking to Russell Targ and talking to Ed May, who are both running the remote viewing program at SRI for the CIA,
right,
huge influence on the book. So, yeah, I mean, there you go. See, one of the things that, I try to tell people is that, so we had this program in the early 2010s, the whole skeptic thing with Dawkins and Randy and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett and Bill Nye and just on.
Yeah,
and
the
on.
new atheist movement. Yeah.
Yeah, the new atheist movement, and which sort of grew out of the skeptical movement. And people were kind of intimidated by that. And they're sort of put on their back foot. It's like, well, I'm into all this weird stuff, but I can't explain it scientifically. And what I would say to you very strongly is that don't try to explain it scientifically. I mean, one of the real issues that I have with the New Age movement, particularly like the kind of Esalen era, 60s, 70s, 80s New Age movement, is how they try to combine science and, spirituality, so to speak. And, one of the things I really believe is that you just end up with bad science and bad spirituality. I really sort of come to really appreciate the whole Stephen Jay Gould idea of non-overlapping magisteria. Like, don't try to come up with scientific explanations for all this stuff, because if there is a science behind it, it's something we don't understand. So just go by the evidence and just go by the results. And if you can't explain it rationally and scientifically, don't worry about it, because who the hell tries to explain anything rationally anymore? Nobody. So why should you?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I tell people about Gödel's theorem. If you try any system of rationality, breaks down within itself. That's a mathematical fact. You can't construct a logical system that is totally, covers all of true statements.
Don't you have to go outside of it?
Yes, you have to make a bigger system, and then that system is. It's so logical systems are useful, but they're not all inclusive, and they never will be. And spirituality, you can't explain the soul. Actually, the soul is electromagnetic, or the soul is particles. Well, you're just trying to reduce spirituality to materialism. I think that's kind of what you were saying, Chris.
It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time, and not only is it a waste of time, but I think it's deeply counterproductive. So just go with experience, go with results, go with the evidence as it adheres to your own criteria, and don't worry about what scientific people think, because nobody else does. I mean,
I agree.
Look at how big witchcraft and stuff is with all the the whole NPC SJW crowd. So,
well, they're throwing sand in people's eyes, literally, the sand being material, the eye being the spiritual, right? That's what's happening.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just do what you're gonna do, and follow your path, and don't worry about explaining it to somebody who doesn't care anyway. Just ignore it.
Well, what I tell people, I say, you know what? If you're not conscious, they don't believe in consciousness. Some of them, they just, we're just all machines. Well, why should I listen to just a machine? Go away and run your machine somewhere else.
Well, that's where reductionism leads to.
Yeah, exactly.
It leads nowhere. It leads to just nothingness, and it leads to nihilism. So why even bother with it anymore?
Truer words were never spoken. Yeah, but don't you think maybe that's the idea? They want to get people without hope, they want to destroy the spiritual center of people's, and they more easily led,
I think that crowd did, that sort of cohort did, but I'm not exactly sure that that's the plan now, because it seems that those people have been pretty much shunted aside.
Bringing in new religions,
to
replace the old ones. There's Joseph Fabry also had a question. Chris wants to know: are you writing a sequel to your novel?
Oh, I sure am. And I'll tell you something. not to give anything away, but boy, the past month's events have really given me a fresh impetus. I had when I wrote the first book, it was I had written, because this crazy thing like first time writers do, I'm going to write a trilogy. I'm going to write this grand sort of, every book's going to be 1,000 pages, and it's going to be this 3-part thing. It's going to be the new Game of Thrones or something. And I quickly dispensed with that idea, but I had a lot of the plot points already written. But with the book being written now and ending up as it did, I realized that most of the plot points that I had been playing with pretty dispensable. But I did have sort of this basic skeleton, so I had that in place. But now I have this fresh impetus, a whole new world to explore. So I'm really excited about it. I don't know. I can't give you a timetable because that didn't work out too well the last time I gave you a timetable. I think I was off by over 4 years. But yeah, I'm real excited. I'm working on it. I'm excited about it, and
I'm excited. I don't know if I can handle it, but I will do my best because it's going to be intense. And yeah, something I forgot to ask you, another bombshell. You wrote that Epstein and Maxwell had a child charity event where they filmed Eye Wide Shut. Is that, or am I sometimes I think I'm dreaming it. I'm like, there's
no, it's 2020. You're not dreaming anything. No, there was a woman who's
it's hard to swallow.
She's a countess, I think. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name right. So she's a countess, and I think she's married into the Guinness fortune, the Guinness heirs. And she was involved, very tight with Ghislaine and Epstein, and but was also running these like children's charity benefits at the mansion where they filmed all the orgy scenes for Eyes Wide Shut. And you just think like, are we just being trolled? It's just like it's just outright trolling.
This can't be real.
It's just so bizarre and strange, but yeah, I mean, there you go. So, I think we should like apologize to all like the really far out conspiracy theorists that we made fun of for all those years, and just said, oh, they're crazy and they don't know what they're talking about, because they were just a little ahead of the curve. I think we need to, I think we need to make amends.
Yeah, no kidding. And I know this is just going to continue, like you like to say, Chris. It never stops, and now you've got
no, it never ends. Everybody goes, it never ends. It never ends. Never-ending story. It never ends.
Yeah, but now you got two threads. You've got the siren thread, and you've got Maxwell thread. I mean,
which have a lot more overlap than you might believe. And that's
I think,
that
oh
we'll be
boy, exploring
in the next exciting novel. And I already have the title too, so I don't want to give the title away, but all I will say is that this next book is going to be a little darker, if that's possible.
A little dark? What are you talking? Oh my God!
It's gonna be a little darker. It's gonna be.
I mean, I still like Morton a lot. He's still a great character, so yeah, I'll be happy to see him.
Yeah, you're gonna see a lot more of him.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure. So one of the things that I've written, I told you when the iterations of this book is that I've written a huge thing on his backstory, and it all got cut, and they were just sort of like allusions to it in some of the dialogue. But I don't know if I should save that for a separate book or put it in one of the sequels, because yeah, he's going to be a really interesting character, but I'm just not sure if I should include it in the sequel.
That'll be great. Any last questions that we get to the end, Vance, or do you have a question?
I think I'm about questioned out here. I got a couple of more. Let's see. I had one from before about someone wanted to know, Red in the Valley. Did I read this one? No. Do you think many of the reporters speaking on the UAP, aka UFO topic, are either intelligence or a group of some kind? In other words, is there some sort of organization behind all the UFO reveals?
For the most part, no, but I do think that the people who've been working with the Times, Leslie Kane and this other writer that she's been working with, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily intelligence, but I think they have very close ties to intelligence, which they've been pretty open about. Like, Diane Pasulka has been pretty open. I mean, almost to the point of bragging that she's got very close ties with intelligence.
Yeah, we had her on not too long ago, right, Miguel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
American Cosmic's a great book.
Great, yeah. I love Diane. But I'll tell you something. I met her in New York when Gordon.
When he had his conference.
So I was talking to her. I was telling her about my whole thing with the stellar alignments, and she was really fascinated by it. She's like, oh wow, you could tell she's really into it, because I was talking about like how a lot of these Bible stories are just basically star maps and everything. So I'm talking to her, having this really good conversation, and say, yeah, I'm friends with Jeff Kripal and all this kind of stuff. And like this woman who's clearly sort of her minder, like just sort of steps in between us, like this woman had like hard bitch written all over her face, and she's just kind of like, we need to move this along. And I was just like, oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the handler.
She definitely gave me like a little bit of a, intelligence operative kind of thing, maybe I wouldn't say a bodyguard, but definitely like sort of a minder and all that kind of thing. So.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not, this is no dig on Diana, because I think she's great, and I think she's kind of hot too. So just throw that out there. Something about her.
Yeah. Well, she's so intelligent, and she's so her mind just goes to some incredible place, and she's so dedicated. She's awesome, and I love her accent. What is it? Is that a what kind of accent is that? A Baltimore accent?
Oh, that's sort of like South Jersey, Philly, Baltimore. Like mid-Atlantic kind of accent. But who's the? I don't know why I'm blanking on the name, because I always blank on this guy's name. Who's the philosopher that she says that she's really influenced by? The German guy.
German guy.
Like German guy, and sort of had some weird connections to the Nazis and stuff. What's that guy's name?
Oh my God, I'm having
Heidegger?
Heidegger.
Yeah, she says she's really influenced by the work of Heidegger. I don't know what that has to do with UFOs, but I haven't read any Heidegger, so maybe he's all about the UFOs. I don't know.
No. I know Hans Jonah, his pupil, the great Gnostic scholar. That's about it. All right. Well, awesome. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up. Again, audience, Chris, definitely need to go and always check in on secretsun.blogspot.com, and definitely check out Chris's book, He Will Live Up in the Sky. Chris, any other places where they need to look for your work or find you on the internets?
I'm on Twitter. I'm always tweeting.
Good animal tweets. Those are my favorite.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because somebody had tried to cancel me. Somebody was trying to get this whole cancellation project going, the campaign against me about a month ago.
Really?
Yeah. And it's interesting because since he tried to cancel me, I've gained like 1,000 new followers.
No such thing as bad publicity, I guess.
Yeah, I guess not. I don't know.
Oh, well, why would they cancel you? For your cute animal tweets that I love? Or
No.
and you usually don't. Yeah, oh well.
I think a lot of people do this stuff because you get more attention to yourself when you take on somebody who's got like more of a following than you do.
You will, yeah. If you can like tweet, like reply to Donald Trump at 5 seconds after you do and say something, you'll get 100. I mean, there's a whole science to this publicity whorism.
Well, it's funny because I did this inadvertently, but I had responded. There was this really odious tweet that Jane Fonda had made where she was showing off all this custom jewelry and making like weird, like lame kind of politically correct justifications of it. This is sourced here, and fair trade and all this kind of nonsense. And I just kind of like made some sort of snipey comment about, look at me showing off my incredible wealth and privilege and cloaking it all in woke gobbledygook. And I got like 8,000 likes on it. I just what the hell? It went viral. I think what happened is that some big conservative blogger had linked to it, and so I got like 8,000 likes. But no.
Wow. Well, there you
That's
go.
way beyond anything that I usually get.
The silent tweet jardy.
Well, awesome. Well, yeah, definitely follow Chris. He hasn't been canceled on Twitter, and he puts out good content. Follow his blog, and certainly follow and definitely get his book, all his books. I mean, I think Our Gods Wear Spandex, it's so ahead of the times, how we treat comic book characters, although I don't miss the movies. I'm sure you don't either, Chris.
No, I think we're really at the end. It's
the end of Hollywood, hopefully.
Well, we're nearing the end of Hollywood, but I think the superhero thing is really over. And it's kind of interesting too, because the modern iteration of the superhero as we know it started really, I think, with the X-Men movie in 2000, Bryan Singer, ironically. But you know, it's kind of hit that generational wall. I don't think that we'll be seeing a lot more of that, to be honest with you. I think that it's been digested.
Good.
It's worked its way through the system, and I mean, I don't know what's going to replace it, but see, the interesting thing though is that you know, the more you look at stuff, you start to get so jaded, because you just realize that, like, so it's pretty well known that most movies in Hollywood don't make money, right? They lose money. And the system is kind of held aloft by the blockbusters. And I just think, like, how is that economic model feasible? Well, the economic model is feasible, you know, in light of what they call Hollywood accounting. And Hollywood accounting is basically money laundering. So I really start to wonder if, like, the entire economy is just kind of built on, like, money laundering and pharmaceuticals and human trafficking, and then everything else is just kind of, you know, window dressing. But that's the core. It's like fraud, you know, massive financial fraud, human trafficking, and pharmaceuticals are just basically the drivers.
Doesn't pharmaceuticals pay for the news that we watch? I mean, that's their biggest sponsor. It's like,
yeah, it's well, the other thing too is that, you know, the pharmaceuticals that get so aggressive, not only about, you know, creating diseases that need to be cured with their product, but like getting people dependent on steroids, and you know, with the trans movement, you know, getting people reliant their entire lives on HRT, very expensive. And
tranquilizers to get you antidote for the news.
yeah, well, everything, you know, and it's just building new dependent populations seems to be, you know, that's their economic model, and you know, it's very, very troubling, and whatever.
yeah, it's exposed. All we can do is expose it, and hopefully 2020 is a year where it all comes out and we can see reality for what it is, at least the men behind the curtain.
I think what we're going to see in 2020 is, I think we're going to see, you know, what I personally believe is that I think we're going to see things just really go kablooey in late summer, early fall, and then we're going to have like a massive crackdown. I think that's the way this is going to play out. Because one of the things that's been going on, and I know this doesn't sort of fall under the whole weirdness category that we were, but it really does now, right? But if you've been reading the news, so everything in the news, like Black Lives Matter and the statues and the riots and cancel culture and all this kind of stuff, and those are the things that are getting the headlines, and those are the things that trend on Twitter. But if you pay attention to what's going on, you know, not only in the financial world, but also in this unbelievable ramping up of escalation and tensions in China, you know, they closed down that embassy in Houston, and they were like out in the courtyard burning all these papers and stuff. I mean, this stuff is getting a little extreme. So I think that plays into a lot of this as well. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be an election, and I hope that things don't get too much worse as far as you know, this whole racial violence that they're ginning up as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's Yeats's The Second Coming poem. The center cannot hold, turning the wide. I mean, every line by line of that poem seems to be coming true in some way. So yeah,
and in a way that, you know, I know he'd written that about was that the First World War he'd written that about?
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, that was like a church picnic compared to what we might be seeing unfold in the days to come. But, you know, we also have, like, you know, the center doesn't hold, is that, like I said before, there is no center. You know,
yeah, you're
can't
right.
be a centrist because there's no center. You know, and you can't be a conservative because there's nothing left to conserve, you know. And you can't,
Right.
you know what I mean? You know, it's like, and you can't really be a progressive because progress has reached its end point. So it's a very interesting conundrum we all find ourselves in.
All right. Well, we'll just have to continue. But yeah, audience, for those of you in the chat, thanks for keeping us company. Your company's great. Your questions are great. We appreciate you being here. And Vance, thanks for handling the crowd and being here on this journey in the
I
Viking
tried.
car.
You're welcome. And this was a lot of fun. I had fun with both you guys tonight.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Always. Yeah, Chris, thanks a lot for coming on. I always love having you here, and good luck with everything. And thanks for your time.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Chris.
Thank you,
Good
guys.
luck.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
right.
Well, to
See you next
everybody.
time.
Yes. And again, this will be out in audio in about 24 hours. Please support Chris. Please support Aeon Byte. And we will see you very soon. As I like to say, hello and goodbye as always. And let us get out.